On Prime Time, we reported on the recent surge in interest towards Russia from job seekers spurred by the Eurozone crisis.
But are things really looking that good for foreigners wanting to work here? Neil caught up with Luke Jones, a specialist from a leading international recruitment agency, to get his views on the matter, and we can have a look at that interview right now.
Let's talk about this then. First of all, do you agree with this? Are more foreigners coming and looking for work in Russia? I mean, that's what the statistics, the articles suggest. Do you go along with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's that people are suddenly waking up to the prospect of, hey, let's go and live in Russia. I'd say it's probably more driven by companies thinking, let's open an office in Russia and we need somebody to go out and head it up. So, you know, this guy, yep, he looks good, we'll send him out there. It's more like that.
OK. Would you say that Russia is becoming a more attractive place then for businesses to come and set up here? Or is it just that things are kind of so bad back in the West and, say, in Europe that they're just looking for opportunities wherever? Probably
a little bit of both. I mean, Russia, I still think, could do a bit better PR job on itself. That, unfortunately, the fault of the Western media is that Russia is usually very negatively portrayed. But what we say to people is, look, come on in, have a look. There's a lot less competition here. The economy is doing pretty well. I mean, it's not as bad as you think back home, but it's better here. There's companies here with money to spend. They like Western products. So, you know, it's slightly better here than back home. Do you see there being a time when it's going to be a level playing field? I mean, what's the competition like between the locals, the Russians and the expats for particular jobs? I mean, I'd say it's... A lot of the time nowadays, it's much more... Companies are focused much more on Russians, and the foreigners that come in are nearly always brought in by their own existing company. So, you know, in Antal Russia, when somebody contacts us and says, we need such and such a person, they do want a Russian in the majority of cases, because they'll say, look, if we wanted a foreigner, we'd bring our own guy in.
Has that changed much in the last few years?
In the last decade, not really. It's been like that, and I don't see that changing much. There is still a perception that foreigners earn a lot more. Well, I would say at the top level, the salaries between Russians and expatriates is pretty similar. The difference is that if you've been brought in, you'll probably get a very expensive apartment, driver, flights home, medical insurance, schooling for your kids, and that can probably double the salary overall, which explains why there are very few expats in each company. But I think the number will keep growing because it's the biggest city in Europe, and companies want a trusted pair of hands for the first few years when they kickstart their new business.
So you think there's always going to be opportunities then for foreigners to come in and be helping set up a business?
Yeah, no, very much so. And I think, I think just the lines will blur a little bit more.
If an expat sees this and perhaps likes the sound of the way you've portrayed Russia, and perhaps they've seen a bit on RT, what would you suggest to them as being the right things to do to make themselves employable, desirable to somebody over here?
I'd say, first of all, ask yourself one question. What can I do that an experienced, qualified Russian can't? Or at least, what could I do better or differently than such a person? Because in Russia, the language is Russian. This is not Dubai, Singapore or Hong Kong, where English rules. Again, in a reasonable amount of the corporate world, you can get by in English, but outside of that, forget it.
So what, take a crash course in some basic Russian?
I would definitely suggest that, the more the better. With the difficulties of hiring someone and getting them a visa, you've really got to be able to sell yourself as to I can do something better or differently.
Does it help if you've actually come over here, showed a little bit of kind of get up and go to say, I've been to Russia, I know what it's about? The
chance of you getting a job based abroad is almost zero. I mean, this might be the biggest country in the world, but Russians do business, and especially interviewing face-to-face. You know, again, saying, oh, well, I can fly in if required, doesn't wash. Oh, I can do it on Skype. No, they want to see you. Russians do things pretty quickly. So if they like someone, it'll be, right, I want to see the guy tomorrow morning.
Get your crash course in Russian, get yourself over here and start perhaps do a bit of doorstepping, banging on doors, making calls.
Because people like that, because, again, Russia doesn't have a sales culture. You have to remember, and I remind foreign clients of this that 1 generation ago, selling something would have landed you in jail. Probably half the vacancies we get at Antal are some kind of sales or customer-facing positions, and some of them will be selling to other either foreigners or, I would say, sort of westernised Russians, and that's where some of the expats are a lot more proactive. I mean, my first job in the mid-90s was selling the Moscow Motor Show. And believe me, if somebody would buy a stand at the Moscow Motor Show in the mid-90s, they'd buy just about anything. You know, you were ringing all around the world trying to persuade companies to come in, and you had to make a lot of calls.
Yeah, tough sell.
And the idea of doing something, let's say, unsolicited and proactive is still fairly alien to the majority of people here. So depending on what it is you do, if you can pitch yourself as someone, look, I'm prepared to bash the phone and get meetings and drum up some business, then that's somewhere I'd say where you can make a difference. Because, again, Russians perceive sales as something done much more on relationships, on trust, on friendship. Things are changing, though, very much.
OK, sounds like some pretty sound advice. Thanks so much for popping in and chatting to me.
No problem at all. Pleasure.
Cheers.